and they'll turn green. But if you want your mic muted,
Sure. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay, fine.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Okay.
apologize for not being clear.
Okay. Sorry.
I have a housekeeping question. So if we're broadcasting, so yes, and I'll get more into some housekeeping stuff after we do introductions, but since it's just right in front of me, if we're projecting a presentation, how do we see the Zoom squares? Or like in the next meeting, would I want my laptop? Because I'm going to be making sure folks that have questions online have a chance to tap in, but if the presentation's up, I can't see them.
So I will do the screen share
Okay.
thing during the presentation.
Yeah,
And so there'll be like a little snapshot of everyone on Zoom.
okay,
I'm actually gonna try to problem solve with Daniel afterwards, because I think there's a way that I can split my screen between
okay.
the Zoom and then the presentations.
Okay.
But that's something I gotta.
Okay, so maybe in the interim, if it's up on the full screen, if you have visibility
Mhm.
of the smaller boxes, if someone on Zoom wants to ask a question, it will be helpful.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, yeah. So I guess I'll start with introductions. My name is Jill Delano, and let's see, I've lived in my house on McGinnicook Street. This month it'll be 26 years, which I can't believe. Raised my two daughters there who are in their early 20s, and they're both launched, which is great. I'm a real estate broker at Camden Real Estate, and this is my third year on this committee. So maybe we should do the members first and then town staff. So Margaret.
Okay, I'm Margaret Jones. I live at 13 Mountainside and have for the last, 7 or 8 years. And raised in Camden, lived away for many years, came back, have been back for many years, and there you go.
I'm Pete Orn. I'm here 30 years this year. Most of my family is in town here. I've had 4 kids go through the Camden school system. I've got 1 still in there, 2 grandkids now. I've been on the school board for the last 6 years. I came off the school board intentionally, but at the same time, I ended up moving from my job in Rockland as a business manager at RSU 13 to now the business manager here in the Five-Town CSD and Camden Rockport Schools. And I was in the budget committee. It was probably 20-something years ago for a couple of years. I failed miserably at it, and I hope to do better this time.
You know, a lot more now. Margaret said she was on the budget committee too. Was
Back
it
in 1996, yeah.
I'm Andrew Scrivenich. My wife Sarah and I, we've been in our house for 7 years now here in Camden. I'm a local registered Maine guide and soon to be Coast Guard captain. Obviously, we live in town. This is our third year.
From the budget committee?
Third year on the budget committee. Trying to do better each year. Yeah.
And I'm Sarah Scrivenich. I'll talk more later after introductions about Jill and our co-chair roles and housekeeping. But as Andy said, yeah, we're 7 years in Camden, the better part of 10 years though in Maine. Mostly we tried out a couple of other areas and decided Camden was where we wanted to be. Andy mentioned that he's a guide and volunteer firefighter, and I'm an independent consultant, and I work in the clinical research arena. I formerly worked with Mary Beth. So I'm very happy to see her on screen with that, and so I'm excited to, spend my third year on this committee now as co-chairs for the first time. So happy to be here.
Hi, my name's Courtney Sukeforth, and I live at 3 Glenfield Circle in Camden. I've been there for 10 years now, and I'm a single mom, 3 kiddos, 17, 15, and 8, and currently baking pastry chef at Bleecker and Greer, and I'm going to school right now for pre-law, for family law. That's what I want to do. So that's me.
Ray, do you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, fine. I can't tell who's there or not. I'm Ray Andreessen. I live over on Cove Road. And the reason I'm not there tonight is my wife came down with tested positive for COVID last night. So I'm sort of quarantining myself here for a while. This is my first year on the budget committee. I am also president of Berry Spring Nature Center. And I've been on several committees in the town, including the Parks and Recreation Committee, now on the River Advisory Committee, and I've been in Camden since 2006.
Mary Beth, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Thomas. I'm delighted to be here. I've lived in Camden 37 years, so right now I think I'm the oldest Camden resident. Maybe I'll be beat. I was very interested in joining. I am an addiction specialist. I'm an LCSW. I also have a specialty in systems theory and understanding how groups function. And I have an agenda that eventually I'll reveal I joined the budget committee. I have been cautioned, like several people said, why do you want to do that? Which I thought was hilarious. But I very much want to get to know you and get to know people who are more involved in changing this community. So happy to be here.
Will.
Hi, everybody. I am probably the newest member, not only of the committee, but also the resident of Camden. My fiance and I have been in Camden for a little over a year now. And tonight, I'm sorry I can't make it tonight. The snowfields are open at Sugarloaf, so I am in Western Maine. And we'll probably be here for the next few days.
I think that's all the committee members. So I'm Audrey Kaler. I am the town manager.
And my name is Jeremy Martin. I'm the Planning and Development Director for the town.
I'm Kerry Leishman. I'm the town assessor.
Hi, I'm Dave Morrison. I'm the Opera House manager.
Jody.
Jody Hanson. I'm the finance director.
Janice. Janice? Is she talking? Yeah. Well, Caitlin, do you want to go and Janice can have some time to?
Hi, can you hear me?
Very soft.
I'm Caitlin. I work with Carrie. I'm the deputy assessor.
Janice is switching it next. I could introduce Janice.
She's here.
Yeah, so just to take the pressure off, Janice Decency is the middle square in our Hollywood Squares tonight, and she's the assistant town manager. So can we go through just a couple housekeeping?
Yes.
Please.
All right. So again, not to be repetitive, but I am sometimes repetitive. Jill and I were voted as co-chairs somehow. We were trying to figure out and reconcile how that happened, but here we are. I just want to kind of, we're setting out for the next 4 weeks to meet as a group to absorb a lot of content. So I just want to start by reiterating that we are all volunteers on a quest to do right by the town and each other. So I just want to preface it by saying, with Jill and I, it being our first time as co-chairs, I don't know if that's a model that's been used. We are open to getting feedback, to hearing insights or things that could be used to, make things smoother, be more efficient. So please feel free to pass it our way. We know that time is very limited. There's some social experiments going on. Andy and I have both of our girls at home, and we're going to see how that goes. So we'll try to be in person as we can be, but may not. We also know that your time is really valuable. So we know the meetings are set up to be 2.5 hours, and there was a lot of feedback last year to try to be as efficient and succinct as possible. So request to get presentations ahead of time, request to do our reading ahead of time, request to get questions to us as much as we can do to try to keep on pace. To if we can do 2 hours, great, but we don't want to rush through things. We want to hear everyone's voice, but we will be mindful of how that goes. If you do have questions before the meeting, I know, for example, Peter was not able. Feel free to route to Jill and I as co-chairs questions that you may have going into the meeting that we can then also route to Audra and team, so that it's not a requirement, because I know last year and the year before a lot of questions come up in the moment. But if you have things in particular that you want to have focused on, feel free to route those questions to us, and we will let it be known. To have a quorum, we need 6 people. I think different than the first year or even last year. Right now, we have 11 of us. If we don't have 6, then we can't meet. So if you know you're going to be missing a meeting and you can't even, or you can't attend virtually, let us know that. Because there's just a slightly greater risk of not meeting that quorum, but hopefully we will. Again, in person versus virtual, I covered that already. And is there anything else that? I think that those were the basics.
I had one housekeeping thing I wanted to sort of get everybody's feedback on.
Sure.
So Nancy Harlan Jenkins was the 11th person, and she unfortunately can't participate this year. So I just wanted to get some feedback from the committee. Would you all feel better if we asked the select board to appoint an 11th member? It's difficult because they'll have missed this first meeting, but they can certainly go back and
Watch it, it's recorded.
I think if there's someone that can be appointed, it doesn't hurt to have somebody. Does anybody disagree with at least doing outreach for an 11th person?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, and
Okay.
and I will say, which we both learned this in our prep meeting, if we're in person, since this is the first time, at least in my tenure of doing it, when we vote, you just have to raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, we have to do roll call. Not that I'm encouraging everybody to come in person, but if you're here, you could just put your hand up. If you're on Zoom, we have to call your name out. So the more people we have here, healthy and well, then the quicker the votes will go, because we don't have to call you out by name. So that's my little plug, only if it works.
Great, well, thank you so much. So I will get right into it, because another piece of feedback from last year was that it was really, I think we had some long presentations, and we're gonna try to keep them as succinct as possible. So I'm gonna get right into it with the first part of it. So the chairs did a great job with the first setting the rules of order, roles and responsibilities. So I'm gonna go into just talking a little bit about the budget, how it's constructed, the process that we're gonna go through, and then just give you an overview. So y'all can do this. Actually, let me share my screen. Just make sure that everybody can see what I'm doing. All right, so roles and responsibilities for the select board. So your primary role as a budget committee is to recommend the budget to the select board. So we talked all about reading material provided. You can always ask questions prior to the meetings if you need more information or need clarification about something that we talked about. And I think that an important thing for this group, if we're starting to use jargon, which is really easy for anybody in any industry to do, please call us out on us and say that I don't understand that, because it's inevitable. There'll be somebody else in the room also who doesn't understand it. And we talked about all these other things, or the chairs talked about all these other things. Pop them over here. All right, so I like to talk about this every year because, what you're doing is really important as a community, because what the budget does is really set the tone for the year. It's really the most fundamental policy that a municipality has. It really determines what kind of services we provide and to what extent we provide them. And, it affects pretty much everybody in the community. So this is really important work. We're really setting the tone for the year ahead and setting our focus on what's going to be most important to the community and things that, we're going to, be carrying out for the year ahead. So there's a lot of different functions that a budget has. So it's certainly an accounting document to record and control expenses, but it's also a management document. So it helps me figure out, how are my department heads spending money in the appropriate ways, and it keeps them, sort of accountable for the decisions that have been made in this room. It keeps me accountable. It's also really important decision-making for the document for the select board, as well as me and the staff, because things come up throughout the year. So having the budget as a touch point to go back to really helps keep us on course. And communications document, because it's important to be able to explain to the public how their money is being spent, and that's really one of the major purposes of the budget. So, like I said, your work is so incredibly important, and it's not just on sort of the financial or accounting side of this. You don't have to be a financial whiz to be a really good budget committee member. A lot of what's, I think, most valuable to everybody is your feedback on the sorts of levels of service that you desire, and whether or not you think that sort of projects or policies that are brought up through the budget discussion are valuable things for us to be focusing our time, energy, efforts on and spending money on. There's conversations that have come up with the budget committees throughout the years that, sometimes the item or the policy or whatever that's being proposed by budget committee members isn't something that we can necessarily do in the year ahead, but it's really helped inform us for subsequent budget years. And I think a good example, a few years back, the budget committee had a really good, robust discussion about emergency services. And that really helped set us on the track that we're on today, where, we've got a first responder program that's going to be in its first year of operation this financial year. So, it's a very, services that municipalities provide are iterative and they change over the years. And so even if what your input is this year can't be implemented for FY '24, it can be very, very valuable in the years ahead. So I just want to emphasize that because it's not like the feedback that you give us this year, if it isn't implemented, falls on deaf ears, but things take time. All right, so we have pretty standard line item budget. Most of you are probably familiar with this from prior years. So it's really good at sort of connecting, grouping, reporting different information about departments and what they're spending, and wages and benefits that are allocated to certain departments, as well as all of the equipment and operational expenses that they have. So this is a really good way to sort of control expenditures, but it's not always the most flexible budgeting method. So our budget's comprised of the lots of different sections. So the budget message is the kind of narrative that I gave at the very beginning, that kind of goes through, this is the broader intent, these are the things that we're trying to achieve, and these are the areas that you can sort of look to see that. And then you sort of get into the general fund budget, and this is what most people kind of think of as the the town budget. So that's where you find the different departments, and there are different parts to that. So of course there's the departmental budget, but also all the information about our debt, as well as our sort of capital improvements that are planned for the year, and capital reserves sit in the general fund budget, as well as revenues. And at the end, or actually I think it's in the beginning of this one, we have the revenues and expenditure summary, which is kind of the cliff notes of everything. So that's a really good sort of shortcut if you need that sort of touch point to figure out, well, what's the totality of this department or that, and you don't want to go into the individual sections. And we have a few special revenue funds that really sit outside of the general fund budget and are not approved by voters. So there's a new one this year. So all of you or not all of you, but a lot of you who have participated in this process before are familiar with, there's a snowball budget that's separate as a special revenue fund. And the way that works is that their expenditures and revenues are supposed to match each other. So they're supposed to cover their expenses. And it's the same thing with the wastewater department. But we also have a new one this year, which is the Opera House auditorium budget. So we're going to do that a little bit different. It's going to actually function kind of similarly to, I think a good way to look at it would be more like the library budget, where there's their expenditures, we'll look at the revenue coming in, but at the end of it, there's going to be an assessment that's sort of covered by the town through property taxes or through tax increment financing, because that's an allowable expense under our tax increment financing development program. And sorry, that's another jargony thing that I can talk about. Nancy had me do a presentation on it last year, which I think was helpful for me in kind of reorienting the discussion around it, and helpful for the committees last year, I think, as well. We can get into that a little bit later, briefly. So again, jargon, TIFs, so that's the acronym for tax increment financing. So we have 2 TIF districts, one in the downtown and then one in the highway area, which is pretty much, I'm glad Carrie's here, he can correct me. I think it.
Doing fine.
Yeah. I'm not sure, does it start around the Rennie's area?
Yes.
to the border with Rockport?
Exactly,
So that kind of
right.
stretch of Route 1 is the highway TIF. So those 2 districts, it's geographically defined areas where from the year that the TIF districts are put in place, that value is frozen. And then any new value that's generated by that district in the subsequent 30-year period that the district exists is sort of set aside, the value set aside, and needs to be used for specific purposes. So we have development programs for each, and there are very specific things that we can spend those funds on. Our TIF districts have, or particularly the downtown district, has become much more, it's generating a lot more income over the past few years than it has in its prior history, which is good because we can use that to offset certain expenses in the general fund budget. or in some of the special revenue funds. Another jargony thing, when we talk about retiring debt, that's when we completely pay off the principal on a bond or note. We'll talk about COLAs or cost of living adjustments. So that's when wages are adjusted, and usually that's to keep pace with inflation. And so, when we talk about COLAs, we traditionally use the Social Security Index to kind of set the COLA for the year. We talk a lot about surplus unassigned fund balances. $200 or increasing revenues by that much. So 10 cents, it's about $132,000 both ways. And if you want to reduce the tax rate by about $1, we're talking about 1.32 million or increasing revenues by that much. And, with, I think actually it's 1.6. Sorry, I should have updated that.
Valuation?
Yeah.
It's close to 1.7.
Oh, sorry. No, I was talking about the assessed value needs to grow by, yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So anyway, that's just to give you an idea of sort of the scope of what would need, be needed to make any sort of significant impact on mill rate or tax rate. All right. So any questions before we move on to the next part?
And I don't want to pick on Jody for a second, but I see your face on, since you're on Zoom, and I can only see some of the squares, if there's anyone on Zoom that has a question, and Jody, you happen to see it, that I miss it, do you mind just calling it out? Because
Sure.
if that's okay, I'm put you on the spot for just a second.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
So again, I'm familiar with school budgets, not town budgets. So my question is, at what level does the authority lie for a budget? What I mean is, when the public votes on the budget eventually, they're not voting every single line.
Right.
Are they voting on the bottom line? Are they voting by department? How is that? So how's the process of where are we moving towards?
Yes. actually, good question. Just share this really quickly. So this sort of gives you an idea of where we're at in the scheme of things. You know, so I'm presenting to you my budget, the town manager's budget. So that's with input from department heads. So once you make a recommendation to the select board, they'll have their, deliberation, and what will show up, eventually in the warrant that's, goes to the voters for approval. There will be, the different cost centers. So the different categories that we go over, like general government, public safety, highway, streets and bridges, health, welfare, leisure services, cemeteries, debt capital contingency. So those will all show up with the budget committee's recommendation, and then the select board's, number is the one that they vote on.
Maybe stating the obvious, but I think I've seen it happen in some cases last year even. We could put forward our recommendation. The select board can choose to adopt that or override it and go a different direction. And then that is ultimately what gets put in front of for vote.
Yes.
Is ultimately what the select board determines is the final say. So we're feeding the select board's.
Those cost centers. And the next kind of piece of that is that understanding that we are in March, middle of winter, and this is a budget that in some cases it's 15 months from now is spending. It's, it's not, the spending is not going to follow the budget directly. So there are things in the budget that are proposed that are more just to gain the authority to spend, and not that you're going to spend it a certain way.
Yes.
The COLA may be appropriate for budgeting salaries, but maybe there's another method of judging individual pay along the way. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also your point about this is so far in advance of when we, actually start, using the budget. There are so many different changes that, there are things that I will recommend to you where new information has come in while we're going through this process. So I'll say to all of you, well, this is the number that I put in when I was preparing the budget, but I have new information. So I'd recommend you either, increase or decrease this because of the, new, I don't know, Maine Water has a new rate or something, something like that. And it's the same when the select board's going through their process. So it's not always that, there's fundamental disagreement between, all of you and what I've proposed or what you've proposed and what the select board ends up recommending to the voters. A lot of times it's just new information coming to light throughout the process and being able to sort of refine things as we go. So it's really pretty iterative given that we're preparing things so far in advance and new information is coming up all the time.
I was just going to add to that, at least in the past few years, there's a lot of interesting inquiry that comes up in trying to understand, some of the budget line items and what's feeding it. And a lot, I think that helps in driving our decision making. There also will, though, and have been questions, for example, like we are not responsible for assessing, performance of employees of the town. It's like not within our jurisdiction to recommend, although I think maybe it came up once of like how we think the structure should look. But again, so I think it's asking and having inquiry based on budget related items. Ask any question that we want to ask, but if it's in that bucket of really good to know, maybe can be shared, but it may end up being, tabled or, or taken offline. And so I think it's just worth saying that because we need to be informed because I didn't know most of the departments when we started, but it also, there's a line, so.
Great. So any questions before we move on to the next phase? All right.
Okay, so this is where we focus on the administrative finance department. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order so we don't have to kind of skip back and forth. So if it's okay with everyone, going through the admin finance budget, the professional services budget, IT, as well as insurances, because that's kind of, the parts that I do. And after I'm done with that, we can sort of move on to planning and development and assessing.
So we're starting on tab 3.
Yes, please. All right, so to give you a little background on tab 3 in your budget. So this is the admin and finance department. So this includes 7 full-time employees. So it's the finance director, the deputy finance director, who's also officially the treasurer for the town, our clerk, tax collector, our deputy clerk and tax collector, who also is shared part-time with planning, codes, and development for some administrative duties, as well as the assistant town manager and myself, the town manager. So really, when you look at the finance office and what Jody and her team do, you can kind of look at their offices, 2 major bins of functions. So they have the, financial responsibilities and the clerical responsibilities. So, assisting me with the development of the budget, overseeing all the cash management and investments and, all the general fund, as well as reserve funds and special revenue funds that we talked about. Just pretty much any of the functions of the finance office, reconciling and preparing monthly financial reports that get sent out to the department heads to keep everyone on track, as well as the select board, so they can see how we're tracking in terms of expenses and revenues. They, assist with our auditors. So when they're preparing the annual audit, Jody's also really busy getting them a lot of that information. Jody is also the bookkeeper for the Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation, which the town gets reimbursed for. So you'll see that as a revenue on the revenue side when we get to that. All the weekly payroll is administered through here, as well as all of the state and financial reporting. They do all the reconciliations for retirement and all the, sort of HR matters for both the snow bowl as well as the wastewater departments, in addition to all of the town departments or the departments that sit within the general fund are sort of handled and administered through the finance office. They also do all of the accounts payable for all the departments, and the tax collector for both property and excise tax works directly with the assessor for doing commitments and maintaining liens and any sort of discharges that way. And on the clerical side of things, we have the clerk doing, she's a registrar of voters and administers the elections and annual town meeting, all oaths of office. Anytime we have a special town meeting, that needs to be run through the clerk. And a lot of other, sort of duties through vital record keeping, dog licensing, reporting to the state of Maine. They provide clerical support to the Cemetery Association, as well as the harbor. They provide clerical support for there. And a huge part of their job is customer service. So they're really the face of the town. They're the first people that you see if you need to come in and pay property taxes or license your dog or do any of that. So that's Katrina and that's Kendall right now. And then we have a vacant position. So for my office, we really have 2 kind of bins of things that you can look at as well. So we sort of have the management and administration side of things. So I'm the chief administrative officer for the town, and my responsibility is to oversee all the departments and, do all of the, sort of HR, human resource management that's involved in that. And a lot of what I do, though, is coordination between sort of the administrative side of the town, which is the departments, as well as the policy-making function, which is the select board. So I'm kind of like the, that go-between for the 2 of them. Any sort of interdepartmental planning, like if we have a big project where I need to draw resources from a lot of different departments, that's an important responsibility of mine. And, the coordination of those sort of capital planning and budget preparation and any sort of, anything that has to do with municipal facilities, I need to be the one who is, making the final decision on that, as well as infrastructure. So I advised the select board and town meeting when we had open town meeting, but now that it's all ballot voting, it's kind of setting that all up and getting that in place. Another important function of mine is the implementation of different policies. So, once the select board makes a policy decision or the residents make a policy decision through, ordinance amendments or even the budget process, it's my job to make sure that we're, implementing that and working with the departments to do so. And, a lot of it comes down to coordination and communication between the departments, committees, and the select board as well. And on the administrative side, communication is also really important. So receiving calls, all the written correspondence, everything to do with the website sits in our department. When we're doing public hearings and have to send out advertising, that all comes from us, as well as advertising for jobs, bids, and other things that need to go out into papers. We administer all the license, or Janice does, but it comes through our office. Record keeping related to ordinances and ordinance amendments comes through our office. Of course, preparing the annual budget. The town report is the responsibility of the manager's office. The insurance claims and anything to do with preparation for select board meetings and getting information to them, and their packets and agendas and all of that. So when we're looking at FY24, the increases that you're seeing are largely due to wages. And that has to do with, and this is a part actually I kind of left out and should probably go back to. So, when you're looking at kind of the challenges that we have for FY 23-24, all of the sort of fuel and electricity costs are increasing. Everybody, knows that from their own personal experience. It's something that we're seeing here as well, but also labor and contract services are continuing to increase. So I've proposed a 8.7% COLA. And a lot of that comes down to, trying to attract and retain employees. We're really trying to keep pace with, everybody around us, both in the public sector and the private sector. It's been, really difficult to recruit for jobs that in the past it was pretty easy to find people for. So, a good example, the tax collector harbor clerk position is still vacant after 2 months, and that's the kind of position that it used to be pretty easy to find good candidates to fill in the past. We've had difficulty recruiting firefighters when one of our full-time firefighters moved into the code enforcement officer position. It was quite a challenge to find a full-time firefighter. And, we're looking to, increase the amount of, part-time firefighters as well as first responders that can staff that program. And, we need to be competitive with everyone around us because, the emergency services area, there's just not enough people in the state of Maine to fill those positions. There's a real problem, I think, when it comes to training and attraction statewide. And what the outcome is of that is, and, I wish I didn't have to say this, we're really just stealing from each other. We're trying to attract people who are already in that profession from other communities. And it's unfortunate that that's where we are now. And there's a lot of different things that are being done on a state level, and amongst my colleagues in this profession to try and, open up training opportunities like at the police academy and, incentivize community colleges and other programs to do training for these types of positions. But we're kind of, I think, 5 years out from that actually being effective and getting us the volume of people that we need to staff these positions statewide. So, in the meantime, we're constantly struggling to sort of keep pace with everybody around us, in those positions in particular. So that's kind of the reality of that, and why it's such a large cost of living adjustment. In addition, like I said before, we try to index it to Social Security, and that was the cost of living adjustment for Social Security as of the time we were doing the budget.
Audra, can I just ask, so there's the 7 full-time employees that are in that line item. Has that changed in the past? We have, looks like back to fiscal year 20. Has that remained the same? Or are we just looking at the,
Yes, so all the same.
costs? Okay, so it's apples to apples. It's not saying,
Right.
We've created 2 new positions and since then, okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
all the same people. I was trying to think when you were asking that, because we have one employee who became a full-time position in the time that I was here, but I think that was prior to any of the information that you have in your budget book. So yeah, everybody that's there now has been there in the past, so no one new.
And they've been brought. I know there was talk last year of bringing everybody to certain levels and getting everybody to where they should be within the range. And so,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we're not doing, last year was the 3rd year of a big reclassification project that we did across the whole organization over a staggered 3-year period. So we weren't hitting everybody with it all at once. And I would love to say that sort of fixed the problem, but that happened, and then the pandemic happened, and the labor market sort of is what it is. So, that's kind of the reality of what's happening and what we're trying to keep up pace with. So I would say that's, the difficulty with such a competitive labor market and the impact that that on a service delivery organization where over 50% of our costs are, wages and benefits. That's kind of the reality of where we're sitting and what we need to do to stay competitive. So I'd say that's kind of the biggest challenge, and you'll see that over and over again as we're going through the individual budget areas. So I'm gonna kind of come back to the other part of this. But I kind of skipped through some of the other stuff that was in this because I want to be as quick as I can this year. So there's also an increase for a camera operator and transcriber line. So that's another thing. We're thrilled to have Daniel here. He was very difficult to find, and we've gone many, many months without anyone to operate the camera for all the meetings. So that's something that we needed to up that. So we were able to actually get somebody interested in doing that. And, it's going to be the same with getting minute takers. So for FY24, we're not proposing any new personnel, and we're also not proposing to sort of expand or do any new programs or services when it comes to the admin or finance budget. So I'll stop there if anybody has any questions.
Audra, just curious, and I hear you that the wages are, we need to be more competitive. Have you looked at, or is there a kind of a research study, or what other towns like us in Maine? And I hear you that you're experiencing that we can't find town, or that we need to maintain our town. But have you actually looked at towns of similar size to us in Maine, and what their salaries and how look like, and just.
Yeah, it's so the Maine Municipal Association, they do a salary survey every year, and it's really difficult because a lot of small and even medium-sized towns, or frankly, even some of the larger cities, positions aren't always comparable because you have people who wear multiple hats in different positions. So it can be really hard to try to compare everyone. And I know Rockport recently did their own, salary survey, and, I'll look and see other municipalities that kind of, try to compare based on what they're looking at. And, it really depends on, we do very well. Like we are definitely keeping pace. We are definitely competitive. So anything that's proposed this year is really just trying to keep up with everybody around us. So, there are some positions where we certainly, pay better comparatively to comparative municipalities. There are some that we don't, and then there's a whole range of ones in the middle. And I'm sorry, Will, I know that's not a really satisfying answer.
It's fine. If you were to, it's helpful. If you were to maybe estimate, like, I'm just thinking if I'm a candidate and wants to be involved in town planning or wants to be involved in something regarding a municipality in Maine, who do you think? What town do you? And let's say that their motivating factor is pay. What town is you think that like are people going to be looking? Is there a particular town, like is it Kennebunkport? Oh yeah, they pay them. Is that? I guess is that? Do we think about? I mean, because we obviously want to attract talent, we want to be competitive. But is there a town out there that comes to your mind that says, oh, they really have great compensation packages for town employees?
So I would say, I do think we do really, really well. I would say that, typically some of the larger service center towns, they have, they compensate their employees at a higher rate. And, that can be based on sort of the expertise that you need to have in, a more complicated environment, depending on the position. I would also say that higher value towns where there's a higher expectation of levels of service amongst residents and the cost of living in that community is higher, they typically have to pay a higher rate to their employees, because a lot of these municipalities, while it's not required that they live there, a lot of people want to, live closer to where they work, or, there are some employees that are required to live in the municipality that they're working in. We don't really have a residency requirement here, but, it's much easier for people to live closer. So, that's just kind of, I think, generally how that works. I would say that, I'll give you, I've had a few people that I've recruited over the years where I haven't necessarily been able to match where they've come from on wages, but I have been able to be competitive in recruiting them because of the benefits that we have. So I would say that, we do really well, but it's about keeping pace with everyone around us. And I think when you have a labor market like this, everybody is just very quickly adjusting things. And that's very obvious when you look at emergency services. And I guess the problem is that puts pressure on everybody else, because, I have to look at an equity thing sort of across the organization when I'm looking at my personnel policy and, what's set in terms of the pay plan because we have a step and grade plan that sort of determines everybody's pay range. So, that's kind of what I have to look at from a personnel management perspective, when looking at pay and pay raises.
I know this is a question that we've asked in years past about the emergency service, and because I know Jill asked about the 7 FTEs remaining flat from at least from 2020. I don't know how long that's been the model. Is that, not the comfortable is not the right word, but is that allocated with employees? Is that with a wish list of other potential needs as the town has changed, or is that with all needed positions?
So I would say that, over over the time period that I've been here anyway, we have brought in that one additional FTE as the deputy clerk and tax collector. And, that kind of came at a time pre-pandemic where a lot of people did come into the town offices for services. So that, the counter was really busy and there was a lot, a lot of face-to-face customer service that sort of, dwindled after the pandemic, because of course, during that time, we really geared ourselves up to being able to provide all those same services remotely. And we'll talk about that, like when we go through the IT budget and some other areas. So that's one of the reasons why that position, also during the pandemic, Jeremy's department got a lot busier because you had, a lot of people moving in, building new houses, renovating houses. I don't think anyone expected that to sort of be the outcome of the pandemic, but, a lot busier in codes, planning and development. So, we moved that person's time, that FTE's time from, the administrative office and helping the clerk to, helping the codes planning and development and assessing. So that's kind of the change that I see, is that, having 7 people, it might be better, 6.5 is probably a better way of looking at it.
And go ahead.
I guess piggybacking on Will's kind of comment, and what you were describing didn't sound like something that a cost of living increase would solve. Like retention and recruiting seemed more specific to the positions that you're trying to hire. And that maybe there's a different approach that I'm sure you're looking at, but does this kind of cost of living increase, which is general, give you the tools to do more or less depending on the need of the position?
I would say that having this sort of adjustment would, sort of keep us at a place where, we're able to compete with people who are, other municipalities who are recruiting the same positions. And, we're not going to fall out of pace with, with them.
Just by giving the cost of living to every position?
I do think that kind of across, yeah. And that kind of goes back to the, the kind of fairness. So once you're kind of looking at a few different departments, the way that our step and grade plan works is that, you have say a firefighter or a policeman and I don't know, somebody in an administrative position that are all a grade 13 or something like that. And, if I'm going to raise the pay rate for, I have to just be equitable in the way that I do it. And it just can have unintended consequences for other areas if I'm not sort of equitable when it comes to raises.
Right, but if you still have some positions, it sounds like, that are still open, that maybe the cost of living by itself may not be enough to attract to certain positions.
Oh, I see what
so
you mean.
So differentiating the reasons for some of the pay changes. I hate the Social Security cost of living because it's 8.7% is $140 a week.
Yeah.
It's based on a much different
Yes.
number, but I like the concept of CPI. But I guess I just want to make sure that you have the tools in the budget, however they're constructed, to address the 2 months of an open position.
Yeah.
And the savings from the unhired position will only go so far.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So, I mean, I don't really have a sort of a good answer to that, because there are other things that I would like to look at, but I think that some of them are outside of the budget process, but might be kind of drawn in. Things like, a lot of municipalities are looking at converting to like a 4-day work week. And not just municipalities, they're like private sector companies and, you name it. So, it's things like that kind of sit outside of the budget process, or, they could have some impact on it downstream, but, those are the things that I think we need to start start looking at if we're going to be keeping pace and, aside from just looking at wages and benefits.
I just think obviously it's the biggest driver of your budget this year.
Yeah,
It's just something that I think that we should just continue to
touch back on.
back and just go, kind of brainstorm in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now two questions. I have one. The first one I was going to ask is for the attorney, are the wages built into this, or is there a separate?
So that will be the next one.
Okay, that'll be the next one. So I'll table that. And then I guess the other question I have building on Peter's inquiry was, I'm just curious. I know last year we were looking at with the influx of people moving here and the increase potentially in population. I'm just curious if you have found, more of a pool of individuals or a different, I'm just curious like how that increase, I don't know what our population increase was. I probably could have figured that out by reading more, but if there's a kind of a change of like DNA of kind of who's come in, or if it's opening up more opportunity, or if it's, I don't know, just curious.
Yeah, it's probably a good question for Carrie, because he sees it sort of Carrie and Jeremy, because they see it sort of like, that in real time with, the people that sort of, make changes to, the ownership of their property and, questions about assessments and that sort of thing. And Jeremy with building and planning permits. I think I've been surprised by just the volume of new residents from out of state that have come to Camden. A lot more educating on snow removal this year than I've ever, and not that we've had to do like a lot of snow removal this year in comparison to other years, but yeah, is that kind of what you were asking?
I guess I was just thinking more about in terms of potential pool of applicants, in terms of just in terms of attracting individuals that have, moved and resided here. Like, is there any shift in, of who might be new, to the area and maybe have different lenses of kind of what, with salaries and things. And I was just curious if that's had a positive impact on filling some of these roles.
I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the new people that are moving to the area, they work remotely. They work remotely, or they're retired.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're not the people applying for the jobs that we have open. So yeah, that's kind of, we're getting, great influx of new people who want to serve on boards and committees, which is, always nice to have, new residents who want to get involved. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not translating into people who work here.
And a lot of kids too. So we're one of the few school systems in the area, definitely in the area, that is not having a decline of students. We're actually seeing increases.
Audra, Ray has a question.
Okay, just wondering, do we have a net increase in the population of Camden over the past year, or for whatever time frame you might have?
So I can look up the American Community Survey data to see, what we look like, over the past year. The last thing I've looked at really, of course, is the 2020 census, and we did increase our population slightly over that period, which I was really surprised, because really poor response given, when it was done. But I'd be happy to look at that, Ray, and get back to you.
That's year-round residents typically. It's like where their primary address is. So, I mean, we have a whole layer of complication with how many summer seasonal homes or second homes, third homes that are not counted, that still require services.
I do think when the pandemic hit, we had a lot of people that moved up here into their second homes and were here for a period of time, and I think they were going to stay. I think I've seen some of them go back.
So our number might not really be a true accurate number of
and
how many people need things.
Residents, like what's our summer population versus like our sort of year-round population. I I don't think that I've seen any communities like us in Maine come up with a good way of figuring that out. You know, I mean, I can't remember whose budget I was looking at. I think it was like Kennebunkport the other day. And they had the Southern Maine Regional Planning Commission try to estimate like, okay, this, you know, our year-round population is X and our summer population is, you know, 3 times greater than that. But, you know, there's just no real good way of figuring that out. And, you know, that would be something that I think all of us would love to have a better sense of what that actually looks like, because it would help so many communities like us plan better if we had a good sense of, you know, what the population fluctuation actually was.
And now I'm going to break my own rule a little bit and digress, and then we can table. But I mean, one question also comes to mind is like what housing options that there are. And I don't know, again, this is not for, there's not a housing option line item for affordable housing in our budget that I'm aware of, but I'm just also curious to attract and have individuals that actually can fill those positions and where they actually can find housing that's reasonable. So I don't know how that plays into future budget or current budget, but it would just be.
It's a really, as a community, it's something that I think, you know, we really need to grapple with in any way we can, because it's not just the town looking for people. It's, you know,
Every business.
Yeah, absolutely. So services need employees, and it's really, really hard to find housing anywhere in the mid-coast.
Well,
Yeah, yep, absolutely. That's a really good point, Courtney.
There's also a message coming in from Allison McCullough wondering, maybe finding out how many registered voters we have in Camden, which I don't have that number in front of me right now, but that's a good indicator too.
Yeah. Yes.
Audrey, you had mentioned the prospects of moving to a 4-day work week. Do you see that happening this year or 2024?
I think a lot needs to be done for us to sort of figure out if that's a viable option for the town, and a lot of conversations with, you know, the community as well, to see how, you know, how well that's received. And if we can deliver services at the same level, if we ever theoretically did transition to a 4-day work week. Because there's benefits to doing it, but there's also drawbacks. Because I think, you know, typically in the places it's worked, the day you have longer days, and that's difficult for people with families. So, you know, there's, like I said, it's a lot to kind of work through. But it's something that I think, you know, everyone's starting to take more and more seriously and look at how that could be possible.
Can I just comment on your question about housing? I will say we have seen a lot of people buying up homes for short-term rentals. I mean, that is happening. I would say probably, I mean, I think I know probably 20 homes that have been converted to short-term rental, and that takes those houses out of the, you know, the housing market.
Airbnb stuff?
Yeah, Airbnb stuff for sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, I know a business right next to us that was planning to do some residential units upstairs for market rent. I mean, he's unfortunately going to keep, I mean, it's a good thing, but for his employees, because his employees can't find places to live.
In terms of our efforts, should we look at, are there specific questions within, in terms of the first vote? Like, so should we look at, are there any questions that we have within each of the line items that have been specified, or any specific, is that a good segue?
Yes.
Audra, okay. So I could talk housing for a long time. I just want to, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, you know, before we move on to talking about professional services, are there any other questions about the admin and finance budget specifically?
Now, the only comment that I would have is, if you do see, changes from a 5-day to a 4-day work week, then that significantly changes my personal feeling on the amount of pay, just because you're taking out a significant amount of hours, so the hourly rate goes up. And then
Still have the same.
I'd imagine that if we did do 4-day, we might want to expand our team from 7 to something, just to have some rotating. But if you don't see us making that level of change, then would it be appropriate, I guess, to look at it and say we're staying a 5-day work week?
Oh, yes, yeah. So the budget that I'm proposing to you all now, that it's same level of service, same schedule, so no change.
Okay.
For FY24.
And I don't think it's possible to go to reduce the hours either. I mean, I think everyone would go to just be a 40-hour work week. Just
When I do shifts at the fire department and I do 4 days, which is a 4-day work week, they're 12-hour days. And what Audra was saying about people that work in town and having those long 4-hour or 4-day weeks, 12 hours, it really takes a lot of figuring between Sarah and I and our kids in school and drop off and pick up. So that's that strain that's there. So I think Audra, you just said you're going to stick with the 5-day work week for now for most everybody else. So.
Yes, yeah. So definitely a lot of planning, discussion, and other work that would have to happen for that to be sort of a realistic thing for the town to consider.
Any other thoughts or questions for Audra? Anything that jumps out that's different? Other than the full-time wages are pretty much the same, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the adjustment.
Yeah. Do we want to move to accept the town manager's recommended amount, or an alternate amount, or? Is anybody raising their hand over there to make a motion? No? Bob can't.
I'm not here.
I mean, I'll make a motion to approve the administration and finance tab for the town manager's recommendations.
So that's the $972,150, and is that Will?
Yes, yeah. Are we just doing the full-time wages, or are we doing the full?
I think we typically do the full total. We don't go line by line. Yeah, so that's why I thought we could, if there was any other, some of the other line items are.
Yeah, I didn't see anything material. I just saw maybe slight increases, maybe some rounding, and obviously the camera operator was the one that stuck out, but that seems to be critical with our hybrid offering these days.
Right. So would you like to move to accept that full amount, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'd say, move to accept the full amount as presented on the town manager's report.
Thank you all. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, so is that Ray? Ray seconded?
Yes.
Thank you, Ray. Any other thoughts, questions before we take a vote? All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, so Sarah's going to do the roll call to make sure everyone on Zoom has their voice heard.
And I still can't see all the squares, but let me go back to my cheat sheet here. So, hold on. Okay. So, Ray Andrensen.
Yes.
Okay. So yay. Let me see who's next. And then we have Will Addis
Yeah.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, that's an affirmative. Did I miss anybody online?
No.
Okay, okay. See how fast that was? That was like a, I'm just saying, last year it was like all 11 of us.
Were you all here
Every vote.
Third year people, the
21 members.
21, yeah, every roll call was 21 people, every name, one by one.
brutal.
Yeah. We were S's, so it was like, we had to, yeah. Anyway.
Was that poor Robin that had to do that? Oh, that was something. All right, so the professional services budget, so that is page 3 in your book. So this is really where the budget for our town attorney sits. So this is the second year where he's been a contract employee. He was a actual full-time employee the year before that, and we had an interlocal agreement with the city of Belfast where they, they paid for a portion of him and we paid for the other portion. I don't remember what that was off the top of my head now. I think it was like 2/3, 1/3. And so we, Belfast, wanted to move on from that arrangement, and we wanted to keep him as a contract employee. And really the philosophy behind that was just having sort of like a fixed, predictable cost for legal services instead of, sort of doing our best to kind of guess year to year or just try to keep a flat legal budget and then, kind of absorb any surprises on years where we needed a lot of legal services versus the years that we didn't. So, this from a budgeting perspective just gave us that level of predictability that I personally like. And I think it's been great for the staff as well because, we can sort of go to the town attorney ahead of time and, work through certain issues, particularly in the, planning and development department where there's a lot of, ordinance development and, other issues that could have legal consequences, sort of having that resource to us that, we're not kind of worrying about rationing has been, really helpful and useful to everyone. And, there are a lot of municipalities that are sort of moving to these sorts of arrangements. So Rockport and Rockland have, contracts with Bernstein Sure to do similar things. But I think the benefit that we have that they don't get is that with a big law firm like Bernstein Sure, they'll do a sort of fixed fee contract for legal services, but it only covers sort of your really mundane day-to-day stuff and it doesn't cover litigation. Whereas, I almost feel bad saying this and hope that Bill's not watching, but Bill, this covers any litigation that we have. So, it's a really, pretty favorable arrangement when you look at comparable ones. So, the legal budget and professional services budget, certainly the town attorney. So he provides legal opinions on matters that relate broadly to municipal government. So he's a resource fee for all the town departments as well as the select board. So he's the legal counsel for any civil suits that we have or actions and proceedings that are authorized by the select board. And also he's our defense if the town has some sort of legal action brought against us. So he'll review other things, ordinance amendments as they come up, or any other issues where we kind of need to have that sort of opinion. And he also is, really helpful if we have sort of like a complicated ordinance that, Jeremy either, can't because he doesn't have enough time or, it just sort of goes beyond just the planning and development office. It's good to have Bill there.
And another eye on those things,
Yes.
it's just, significant. And he handles consent agreements as well, which is a pretty significant, I think, benefit that we're getting from him.
Yeah, does everybody know what a consent agreement is?
Explain that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think a good example, has everybody?
Atlantic Avenue would be a good one. That was a recent one
Yes,
on
with
Atlantic Avenue.
tree cutting
With the
on
tree
Atlantic
cutting on town
Avenue
property.
around the stream. So, sort of entering into, once you have somebody who violates an ordinance, trying to sort of work out that agreement as to how they're going to remedy that situation without having to go to court.
having a lawyer to sort of work through that with the other party keeps a lot of this stuff out of the court, but, you know, gets us to a resolution that's acceptable to both the town and the person who is responsible for the violation. So there's been, what's that?
Like arbitration.
He helps us through that too. So, you know, when we had, you know, the school and the town of Rockport and the, you know, the kind of calculation error with assessments that had happened over the years, we all had to go to arbitration and, you know, Bill represented us through that, of course. So, and other arbitration that might happen. And in addition to the legal services, also in this budget is any a line for engineering and professional services. So that could be, you know, things that come up throughout the year, having that bit of, you know, flexibility if you know, we find that there's some engineering work that the select board or a department head identifies and brings to the select board as something that, you know, we need to investigate further, or it could be things like, you know, surveying or lots of different, you know, small kind of items that might come up that we need some outside professional expertise to come in and help.
Could you remind me where funds go if they're not used? Like so we have approved what, you know, you don't need an engineer this year and you got $25,000 sitting on the side. Where does it go?
Great question.
What does it do?
A few things that could happen. So at the end of the year, if the select board sort of takes no action on what to do with those funds, it all goes into the unassigned fund balance that we talked about in the beginning. So that $3.6 million. So that's what happens if nobody does anything with that money at all. The select board, however, could look at it and say, okay, you know, you have 15,000 of this $20,000 budget remaining, and, you know, we foresee that there are you know, and usually it's a recommendation brought by the staff. We foresee that, you know, there are going to be a few different projects that we're going to need help with from like a consultant for whatever purpose. And so the select board will approve that money being carried forward into the next financial year. So that'll show up in next financial year's budget. So instead of having, you know, $20,000, we'll have $35,000 to spend. Or they could take that money and put it into a comparable reserve account. So, you know, it could be for something like, I don't know, the public landing. We want to build up that reserve so we can do some engineering work at the public landing. It could be that money gets put into that reserve account. So those are kind of the three different things.
And then for the subsequent year, followed the imaginary year where it didn't get used, it went somewhere else. The next year, are you requesting the same amount of money? Are you requesting more? Are you requesting none?
So it kind of depends on what's planned. So there'll be some years where if, you know, a balance was sort of carried forward into that account. And so I know it's there. And we haven't spent it yet, or we don't really have the ability to spend it in that financial year, then I'd come to you folks and say, well, you know, I asked for 20,000 last year, but I know that we're going to be carrying forward 15,000, so I'm only going to ask for 5 or something like that.
This is a question I think came up a little bit last year, and Peter Lindquist sent some. He's flying over an ocean, so he sent a few questions forward. So we said we were going to honor some of those things. So the question on the attorney, I know there's some really just an inquiry with this.
I would just read what.
I'm not going to read it. Look, no. I'm going to do my own interpretation because it includes my own inquiry as well. Given the split between, you know, Mr. Kelly's work with Camden and also private practice, and I'm trying to understand, like, is there an understanding or a review or an annual assessment of hours and a true up of kind of what I'm sure he's doing it to try to figure out allocation of time and such, but I'm trying to see how that flat rate is comparing to hours spent versus, I know you gave some inquiries. I'd like to just hear, or have others also hear what that looks like. 'Cause there's only a certain amount of hours in a week, in a month, and I'm
Do his
curious how
hours
that.
correspond to what his stipend is from the town?
That's the.
That was my
that's the
question too,
same thing I'm
because
asking,
I
actually.
did.
Does he track that? I mean, it's great. It sounds like he's really helpful to
Exactly.
you guys, but
Exactly.
do those hours track?
Yeah.
Well, I did a quick calculation because that was my question too. And, if he's working 5 to 6 hours a week, roughly, that's what it would play out, knowing what lawyers charge. So it sounds like we're getting value there.
Yeah, so he.
No-
Okay.
no doubt.
I mean,
In the office, like physically in the office,
Wednesday.
2 days a week. So every Monday, every Wednesday. Then on top of that, he'll come to any select board, planning board meeting that he's asked to attend. And usually he attends in person. Sometimes he will attend via Zoom if he lives on Islesboro, so sometimes he gets stuck. And, on top of that, annoying people like myself and Jeremy are forever calling. him.
Every day, I think I
Email.
Yeah,
communicate with him every day, pretty much.
So,
Okay. No, that's helpful.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't gone through and analyzed all, it's probably something that we should do.
I would think it's closer to 20 hours a week, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
15 to 20.
I
If
just-
you were
If,
saying,
if nothing else, to see that should the position be sourced out or change hands, it would be good to know what is actually
Yes.
potentially up and coming if this arrangement doesn't proceed. So I would just maybe a line of sight of what that looks like versus
Yeah.
based on a certain firm versus other individuals versus,
No, that's a good point, because I think that, looking, like, Bill's not gonna be able to do this forever. People retire. And so, having a good sense of sort of what we're using and what we're getting accustomed to under this arrangement is a very smart idea.
An indirect benefit is he makes us more productive because we can go down the hall or pick up the phone and ask him a question and then get on with our work because we have that guidance. It's invaluable that way.
I mean, that happened today with me. There was a couple of big issues came up and I emailed him and messaged him and I had an answer, within 15 minutes on the issue.
and again, I'll let it be, but it also might be interesting to see in terms of the types of inquiries and level of legal input, if it's potentially a future for, a paralegal, or like if there's different roles or something that eventually potentially would be more embedded in the, within Camden, and then offsetting legal fees for, an attorney level for those that rise to needing those services. That also might be a good analysis to do for future positions, especially if there's so much that comes up in given days.
Audra,
I
Ray
can
has a
say-
question.
Okay.
We got.
Okay.
Ray?
Unmute. Okay. With this amount of money that we provide to our legal counsel, would that be sufficient for if Camden was faced with a lawsuit like the town of Rockport was with the hotel there?
Yes, yeah, so that's one of the idiosyncrasies of this arrangement, is that he also does lawsuits or any sort of litigation is
Right.
covered by
So
this.
I think that lawsuit in Rockport has cost the town of Rockport at least double what we're paying Bill Kelly.
Yeah, that's true.
And then Margaret, you had
Oh, I was just going to say, as president of our community, it is invaluable for me to have access to legal advice whenever there's a slight question, because that means I can move confidently and correctly. It's worth it.
any other, go ahead, Peter.
So I guess I don't want to doubt the value of this at all. It means a lot of money, but it's also in an area that's kind of a controllable cost. It's also an area where I really, professional services, I really think that it's inappropriate to use a Social Security cost of living increase to indicate what a budget number. And I would, if it's appropriate at some point, I'd be more comfortable with a budgeted increase in that line of 4%, which would mean the total amount for that column would be 98,550. And if anybody's ready, I would move.
Is this so you're talking about the line item for general counsel?
Just for general counsel, I would apply a 4% increase instead of the 8.7% COLA that's indicated down below.
Even if there's not a disputed, in terms of the arrangement, and I don't know if it's based on like contractual year or how, I mean,
I think that we were struggling with how to do that as well. Given that, he kind of started, when we started this arrangement, he was a full-time employee and it's now a contract. So yeah, I'm very open to ideas.
when is the contract expired?
So I believe we're a little outside the financial year because we started this outside of that. So I believe, I think it's like April.
And Peter, is your question, because you're out of concern that this increase won't meet the need or
No,
retention?
it's not
or
a
just-
question. It's more of just, I'm more comfortable with a lower increase for this particular professional service line item. If they were fixing boilers, we've seen 20%. Yeah, we've
Such a
seen
great plan.
yeah,
I had it revert. Okay, so it's to go for a lower increase.
4%. So, and I guess
got
it's
it.
all, so the total amount for the entire professional services category would be $98,550.
And then what would that change the,
That's the total.
Well, so we would want to make sure that the, which line item that we're editing so that I think Janice Jody takes notes on which line items. So she will put in the, she'll put along on the,
77,550.
okay. So what Janice does is, Jody, I have those J names. I have one. She'll put in the fiscal year budget committee recommendation column for that line item. She'll put in the amount that we recommend. And then,
If you could back out the other two
I
numbers.
mean, I
So
guess it's easy
the
because
total-
that's the only
total
line we're
was-
changing, but yep. So 77,550, so we said?
Is that what you came up with?
Would that be for line item -300?
I have 77,398.
So
0.88
70,000,
in other words.
77,400 would be for that line.
Okay.
If you're adding 4% to FY '23,
Budget, correct.
it would be 77,550, which would bring the entire professional services to 98,550.
Okay, so your first number
That's
was
fine.
right on, okay.
Let's do it 22.
Oh,
Yeah, if Peter wants to make a motion.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
I second.
So all in favor? Or any other discussion, any other questions? I guess that's always sort of the.
What's the figure we're actually talking?
Oh, okay, so for the general legal counsel line item, changing that to 77,550.
Okay.
Which is what Jody calculated and Peter originally had calculated. So that changes the total amount to $98,550 for total professional services.
I don't think we should do that. That's just my opinion, because I feel like we're getting a really good deal with him anyways at this amount for the amount of work he's putting in.
Mhm.
It seems pretty invaluable, and I doubt we will find another lawyer that would give us that amount of time for that amount of money to do all the stuff that he does. That's just sense.
Yeah,
Also, just in the Audra's thought of being equitable, I mean, if he was a prior employee and he's viewed as part of the team, despite him being contract, I think we put Audra, was it a 6.9% increase on full-time wages?
8.7.
Oh, it was 8 points. It was 8.7 for full-time wages, okay. But 6.9 overall, okay. I come back to this kind of this at being equitable about it, especially if he's being viewed as a full-time. I know he's not full-time, but seems like when I hear from Jeremy and others that he's functioning like a full-time. Would that be fair to say that you view him as a team player and pretty cohesive, or does it actually feel like he's a contracted employee?
I'd say like a part-time employee.
I feel like he's a
Part-time.
part-time employee,
Yeah.
part of the team.
Because you said 2 days in office, not again, very incredibly valuable, but you're saying 2 days in office with the ability to have communication and access, but it's not 40 hours.
Right.
Right, per.
I mean, I know it's a crystal ball question, but if you presented him with a 4% increase, what might his reaction be? Or are we at the risk of him saying, hey, it's not worth my time anymore?
No, I mean, especially not with this difference. And quite honestly, if it became an issue, what I would do is I'd take the difference out of the professional services line to compensate him. That's kind of some of the adjustments that we might have to do throughout the year. So it's not, for me, it's not like a die on a hill issue, but it is more of a, I get what Pete's point is, that he's different than a employee. So a COLA is not quite the right way of doing it. So it's more of like a contract discussion with him. And, when we went through this and did this, we kind of told him this is what we were doing, and he was fine with it. But, there's not a big enough difference that I think anyone needs to feel too bad about this one way or the other, I guess. I just want to make the point, we're not gonna lose Bill over this.
And I was thinking from an equitable standpoint, and again, I don't know what's baked into his contract and the other FTEs, but that ability to get income from multiple sources versus FTE and what that full-time role is, there is a difference there in terms of that flexibility and in terms of what the revenue streams. So, yeah.
I mean, it sounds to me it's an insurance plan. You're not paying health insurance, FICA, Social Security. It's sort of this kind of peace of mind, right? Besides a great resource. So, I don't know.
Well, Audra, one question, as you mentioned, professional services. I mean, if we look at, so you're budgeting 20,000, but we're already at 20,000 for this fiscal year. And if you go back to where we budgeted 18, if you go back to 22, we spent nearly 40. You go back to 21, we spent nearly 60 grand. I mean, are we low on the 20?
Well, this happens to be one of those accounts that we carry forward an amount of 10,000 from FY22 to FY23. So, which we only have about $7,500 left to spend in that account. So, I would say that we'll be able to, if we probably won't have anything to carry forward for the new year. So that, take that into consideration if you guys feel it's too low, but we won't have any carry forward for the new year.
So did we have with, I'll add one more comment. This is unrelated to this item, but I would be supportive if it's legal to at some point establish like a legal reserve fund for something that might be unexpected later on. So there could be something to draw upon if there was a big case and we needed to monopolize his time or another attorney's time. I just think in terms of budgeting and operating, having something like that, if that kind of reserve account is legal for a town, might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, and when there's sort of litigation or a big case, like you said, it's often not Bill's time, but it's all kinds of other ancillary, expenses that come up as a result of it.
There's no guarantee that you would have to contract out to another attorney to supplement that time as well. So, I mean, I don't know. It's not a big difference in money in the grand scheme of things. So.
All right, well, we have a motion on the floor in a second, so we should probably vote on that one, and then if it can go from there.
All in favor of Peter's motion and.
And then going to online, so Ray Anderson.
Yes, just one question.
Oh.
On the motion, what is the number, the bottom number that we are approving?
It's $98,550.
Okay, yes, okay.
Mary Beth Thomas. She's come out line.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. And then Will Addis.
I'm gonna say no on this one. Just for the reason that I feel I'm in the other camp, and that I feel like we should be increasing our budget here. Last on just based on prior years with the professional services. So anyway, that's the reason why.
And then any nays in the room here? Okay, so we have 5 yeses and 4 noes, so we don't have a quorum on that item. So this didn't happen last year, so, or majority, that's what I mean. We have a quorum. Sorry, majority, thank you. So do we table this or do we, I don't know the proper procedure.
Someone else could make a motion.
So 5-4 is not a, really, okay.
Well, is it, do we need,
Is it
Does
simple
does
majority?
5-4
we just need a simple majority?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought in
yeah,
order for anything, just a simple majority, not
Of the people.
6 out of 11. I know that's how many we need to vote. Okay. All right, well, I guess that motion passes, so
Either way, but.
thank you. Thank you. See, thank you for being forgiving and explaining this. Siri said you're welcome. So, all right, so that one
So
passes.
we're at 8:14. What comes next?
So the next is the IT budget, so that's page 6 in your book. All right, so this is one of the areas kind of with the most change, and I really thought it was sort of important to change this and reorganize how we, kind of show the different, software, hardware, AV equipment, because, there's a lot of different things that we've brought on over the past few years. And so that having the 5 line items that we had in the past, really, I think it was just too much in too few accounts, and it wasn't really categorizing things very well or showing, the expenses very well. So, we reorganized it. So
Let me
now
just hit pause for a second. So
sure.
not hit pause. I'm so used to like my Zoom meetings. It's after it comes after the presentation in the book. So if you move, if you skip forward to beyond the presentation, the budget's picked back up at the end of after thank you. You'll find it.
She's doing that, I do have a question.
Sure, yeah.
Not to go backwards, but I.
Information
remember Jody
technology.
Saying that there was only like 7,000 left to carry over, and we're already almost there going over the other one, so, and you were just like, you probably take some money.
Did you find?
The
professional services.
Yes, to make up for that salary from the beginning. So what other funds are there that we would be taking from if that other professional services needs to get filled? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. So if we need professional services for a lot of this is just sort of unanticipated things. So if we have a project where we need engineering, we build that into the budget for the project. And we have a bunch of reserve accounts that we could pull from.
It's not that we're gonna.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, we're square. I mean, we're good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right,
Everybody found their
so-
page 6.
So yeah, more account numbers and sort of reorganizing everything to better group it by like expense and, you know, show you where everything is. So, you know, the maintenance and technical support line, that's really just our contract with Harbor Digital, who provides all of our, you know, tech support, you know, all of the antivirus and, you know, protecting our system. They do all that kind of work in addition to general IT services and troubleshooting any problems that we might have, you know, just outside of, you know, sort of the monthly maintenance that they do of our system and security and all of that, as well as, you know, printer maintenance, because as everyone knows, printers are constantly breaking. For assessing the CAMA software, so that's, you know, vision and the mobile assessing, mobile assessor, which we share with Rockport, as well as CAI and the web hosting associated with that. So any of you who, you know, sort of go online and look at the property database would be, you know, familiar with that. The next area is the GIS. So we use a GIS program that we need to buy licenses for. And we also have another, you know, it interacts with our assessing software. So that anything, you know, GIS related will sit in that line. And then there's a lot of operational software we use. That's for all the day-to-day business, like our licenses for Office 365, you know, for like Word and our email accounts and, you know, all of those sort of functions. We have licenses with Adobe. A big one is Trio, which is where Jody spends most of her life. So that's our finance software. Outsourcing our payroll. And then a new one is the iWork permitting software. So this is where the code enforcement officer is going to spend most of his life. So a lot of the, you know, any building permit, electrical permit, any permit associated with planning codes and development now goes through the iWork system. So it's both the, you know, workflow and it gives us that ability to sort of allow people to submit these online and see where they're at any point in time. And
Licensing is handled through iWork too.
oh, yes, and the licensing, which is a function of my office, is handled through that as well. So, you know, the vitular licensing, lodging, all the different types of business licensing that we have. The next one is more focused on sort of website and communications. So, you know, the domain licensing and hosting for, you know, all the software support for the website. eCode 360 is a new one this year. So has anybody gone online to sort of look at our ordinances or the charter anytime recently? So it used to be that you had to PDF. Yes. So that was something that was just very difficult for everyone. It was even difficult for us to find things, and we're pretty familiar with everything. So this is a much easier way of being able to look at our code of ordinances and, you know, try to answer those sorts of questions, as well as the charter. So that's all in that eCode 360. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely jump on our website and take a look, because it's really simple to go. If you want to, any type of ordinance that you want to, or a code that you want to look at, you can easily get there and get to different sections. As well as Text My Gov, that's a new one this year. So anybody who signed up for the text alert system, like when there's parking bans or information about the snow bowl that we want to push out, we're still kind of getting the hang of it and trying to get people to sign up. When you go onto the town's website, you'll see the pop-up for it to try to push people in that direction. So that's, you know, that's something that sits in here and is fairly new this year. Zoom licenses sit here as well. The next line is for the AV system. So if we need any tech support, or if anything breaks, particularly in this room, that's our budget to help with that. Internet services, that's what we pay for LCI to provide us with as our, you know, internet service provider. And then the final line is for any hardware. So we have, a replacement schedule for all of our laptops, desktop computers, and then, other hardware that we have. So that allows us to, continue on with our replacement schedule. So we're making sure that, all of our systems are sort of updated and new ones are brought on when old ones become obsolete. And also the telephone system down at the public safety building really needs to be replaced. It's on its last legs. So this would cover off on that expense for this year.
Audra, one question I have is with the, we're so happy newly recruited camera operator role, is that, I would have expected that to offset potentially at whether the audio video system, is that offsetting any of the costs associated with relying on Harbor Digital and these line items, given boots on the ground FTE versus what we're relying on them to?
Well, Daniel's, he's like a part-time.
I'm sorry, I know Daniel, like it's like, I'm having like an existential, anyway, so.
Daniel's he's a part-timer. So, I think they don't really do a lot of the tech support when it comes to the AV system at all. It's more of like if, something that needs to connect to the internet and here can't for whatever reason, they'll help us with that. But, they're not the ones to, kind of figure out like the microphones and the cameras and how that all works.
And then I'll channel Peter again, not reading verbatim. But I think there was a question just about pressure testing and about the security of the systems and who's overseeing that. And are you doing reviews of, software security and data security? And
So that's all very much part of that contract with Harbor Digital. I'd say that's the biggest piece of what they do as part of that 39,000 is all the security and pushing updates to, all of our systems so that, if there's like a virus or an attack or a patch that needs to happen to keep the system secure, that's what they're doing with the vast majority of that contract amount.
And the last Peter channel was about the quality of the connectivity, and is there pressure testing or, are members getting feedback or listening to the quality? I guess there was reference to the McGonagall watershed presentation. Is there a feedback loop, or have there been quality issues around that, or?
Like with the AV system?
Yeah, just in terms of those.
Yeah. It's sort of this room when it was set up, or really when we, set ourselves up for meetings, it was really just for broadcasting, like an in-person meeting room where, the meeting's being broadcast out on YouTube and live streamed. And this whole introduction of Zoom and the hybrid meetings has really made it a lot more complicated. And just recently, the select board approved funds to upgrade the system again so that we can better integrate hybrid participants. And that should help with a lot of the quality issues that we're experiencing. Not necessarily for committees. A lot of them will still be using the Meeting Owl, but for sort of the bigger meetings where it's the select board, the planning board, I think even the budget committee is another committee that will benefit from upgrades to the room. But some of the smaller committees, it just makes more sense for them to use the Meeting Owl and not have all the different complexities of the conference room system.
This is more of a comment. I don't ever see this budget going down, this department, because honestly, it's all about communication, and the more we can get, the more, and I guess, as long as this gives you a total amount of money that allows you to operate this and improve and make and test and make it secure. And as my tech director noted, hope the new hardware is Windows 11 compliant, not Windows 10, as was reported.
Yeah, it shouldn't take up time, but
Yep.
with the wastewater department, you know, prior to the plant upgrades and the software system upgrades, your mind would be blown about the Windows system that's being used. And that's a problem across the country with a lot of those types of systems. But yeah, they're all focused on Windows 11 forward. Yeah.
Well, when the committee's ready, I'm be happy to move the town manager's amount of.
Ray has a question.
Yes, Audra, are there separate IT lines in other parts of the budget, like under the Snowball, the Opera House, or whatever, or is this the total of what the town is spending on IT?
So this is the total for the general fund, but when it comes to wastewater and Snowball, since they're special revenue funds, they have their own budget for IT.
Okay, is there a way that we can quickly get an answer as to how much the town is actually spending on IT?
Possibly.
Does Jody have that?
Jody might be able to help us out with
Are
that.
you talking about what we've spent year to date, or?
Or maybe what's budgeted for this coming year?
Yeah, I think Jody's looking for the combination of the general fund IT budget as well as what wastewater Snowball have budgeted in their budgets.
Yeah, give me 30 seconds and I'll have it for you.
Great, thank you.
I'll ask another question then in the 30 seconds to, do the group working with Harbor Digital, do you do any competitive bids? Are there other companies, like how much is reviewed in terms of the service and the quality and performance and stuff? Or I don't know if they're the only game in town or what the.
It's really hard to unring that bell. So when I first started, I sort of looked into, you know, are there other, you know, ways of setting up our system? You know, at the time when I first got here, it was really focused on physical servers in the office. And, you know, I sort of wanted to move away from that. So I thought, you know, kind of looking around at different options for that and different, you know, companies that provide the same sort of services as Harbor Digital while we made that transition. And it just gets, you know, so complicated for somebody who's not an IT person to kind of figure out where all the different complexities of our setup are. That, yeah, it got to be a little too difficult to figure out how we would even go about transitioning all of that. So it just made, and the money involved with it. So it just made more sense to stick with Harbor Digital, given that everybody was sort of satisfied with the level of service that we were getting. And, you know, they helped us sort of plan our way forward too.
I was just going to echo again a little bit what Peter said. It might be worth, again, because the technology is not going anywhere, it's going to become more trouble than it's worth might end up being, you know, the answer, but it also may be worth, you know, soliciting or doing some of that research or having someone do an inquiry just to see, is there a different avenue to take, even if it looks like a Herculean effort, but if it ultimately gets Camden into a more cohesive system, it might be worth that investment.
Yeah, or even like there's been discussion at some points about having like an internal IT person. So yeah, there's different models for doing it, and you know, benefits to doing it differently.
Especially in the area of IT, just knowing it's hard to unring that bell. If the bell's not the right bell, it's not necessarily worth keeping it. All right, Jody.
Does Jody have her answer?
So between wastewater, Snowball, the Opera House Auditorium, and the general fund, we are budgeting $183,350.
Any other questions or thoughts about anything on the information technology budget?
Yeah, Audra, just one quick one. I don't know if this is, it's not critical, but I'm wondering if this is related, with the Access GIS, I used to be able to Google like Access GIS Camden, Maine, and get into, or Access GIS. I think it's the best map. And it has, you can dive into property details, setbacks, stuff like that. I used a lot with the tree planting program. And I've noticed that when I do that Google search, nothing pops up. Is that because our license is up? Do we no longer have a public access GIS?
Oh, no, it's still on there if you go through the website. So if you wanna go to it, and I don't know why it wouldn't be showing up on Google, but it's through the assessing page. It's called the property database.
Okay, I'll follow up with it, because for some reason I haven't been able to find it. But is that part of what we pay for in the Access GIS?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question, that it's incredibly valuable for a lot of our kind of volunteer efforts too. Is the Field Maps app reflected in this too? Is that like for the stormwater drain, the tree planting kind of? Are you familiar with that Dave's been working on with?
Yeah. So that's all in Vision.
Okay.
Or sorry, not Vision. What's it called?
CAI?
Oh, GI.
CAI.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the way it all.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just anecdotally, guys, that has been so valuable for us in determining, when we go to the tree program and us determining potential locations and then updating them once our trees are planted and keeping track of all the trees in Camden. And then also there's another layer for stormwater and really tracking all the various different components of our stormwater system. Allison McKellar has just been incredible in kind of walking the various streets of our town and updating this. And so the technology definitely that we're seeing here is kind of experiential through its residents and volunteers, and it's definitely helping to move the town forward. Just put an anecdote there.
Yeah, GIS is, one of those tools that it's only going to become increasingly more important going forward.
Should we make a motion? Is there any other questions before we? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Who wants to make a motion?
To accept the town manager's amount of $166,150.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded. All in favor?
Moving to online. Ray,
Okay,
yes.
in favor.
Mary Beth Thomas,
Yes.
Will Addis.
Oh, yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Awesome. Unanimous.
Motion carries unanimously. Great. Thank you.
So housekeeping check in terms of time. So we're at 8:35. We're doing a good job, everyone. We've got, we're on insurances next. So Audra, in terms of what remains for tonight, and I know capital reserve was one that we'll keep going, but I just want to.
So Jeremy, Carrie, and Dave are all here to
Okay.
do theirs as well. So
Should we have Dave? I remember poor Dave had to come back last
I
time.
was gonna say, should we can we prioritize since you since you guys are here, and then we might need to bump some.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Does anybody disagree without doing a formal vote? Okay. All right. So we're gonna.
So we're moving to, did we say we're going to go do Opera House next?
I think
that-
I think we're gonna do.
Dave's
Sure.
like, okay, you're on.
So tab 3.
Yep, tab 3. Opera House.
So Jody has a PowerPoint that I think she can share with us. And while she's doing that, I'll just say, good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Morrison. I am the Opera House manager. I'm in my 5th year, I think, of this. I'm in my, I want to say 19th year of working for the town. And what I'd like to do is first just give you a little bit of an overview about the Opera House and what we're doing and what a year looks like, and then talk about the budget.
Almost there, Dave.
Okay. I'll just keep going. So to start with what you may know, Camden Opera House is a 485-seat restored Victorian theater. We are unique pretty much up and down the coast because we are municipally owned, for one thing, and we do not only rentals, but Opera House productions. A rental show tends to be we rent out the venue and we staff it for someone like a dance company or Camden Conference or whatever. And an Opera House production is one where we do the entire production ourselves, choose it, book it, support it, put it on. So you can go to the next slide, Jody. So could we move?
Yes.
Thank you so much. That's great. So this is just what a year looks like from June to June. 5 sound check performances. Sound check performances are what we started during the pandemic. Low ticket price, short program, free live stream, and then it's archived on our YouTube channel. We've had 57 days of rental events. A lot of those are dance companies, and they're other things. We've been able to help out Bay Chamber when they had to move a show from the Rockport Opera House. So any rental event. We've had 13 Opera House produced shows, which is, I think, the most we've ever had. And there's been a good variety of those. 4 free Summer Sounds concerts. That's a program we started doing at the Camden Snow Bowl in August on Sunday afternoons, free outdoor concerts. We've had 6 co-productions, which is sort of a new thing. A co-production is somewhere in between a rental and an Opera House production. It's where we share the risk and the reward with someone who wants to put on a show. So for certain appropriate scenarios, we've been trying that. We've had 12 conference days, Camden Conference, Camden International Film Festival, and 3 Blue Cafes, which we're just starting, which I'm really excited about. That was a program we started in 2018. Intimate theater space on the 3rd floor, free admission, interesting artists, cash bar by 40 Paper, and the pandemic put it on hold, but it's back. And so our first one is actually this month on the 10th. You can go to the next slide. So another component of this is the Community Arts Fund, which is something you can donate to when you buy tickets online. You can throw a $5 bill in a bucket in the lobby at certain shows, and once a year we have an appeal. So what's nice about the Community Arts Fund is it allows us to do a lot of shows and it has no impact on the taxpayer. And as of February, our balance is $20,714. Next slide. So this is the things we do with the Community Arts Fund. The Blue Cafe is free admission. Camden Summer Sounds concerts are free admission. The Sound Check series has free live stream and a low ticket price. We support things like Jazz in June, which this year is going to be a 2-day town-wide jazz festival. And this year we brought in a touring show from New York City called Rhapsody in Black about the Black experience in America. And we were able to offer that for free to local schools and students. Next slide. So we've had great luck working with local partners. These are all folks who have sponsored and helped us put on shows. It allows us to bring touring shows and all manner of things. Lord Camden Inn, 40 Paper, Camden Mainstay Inn. They've been great. The First, Blackberry Inn, Abigail's, Elms, Blue Harbor House, Studio Mind, Zoot. These are all local partners that we work with, and they sponsor and help support shows. Next slide. And this is just some current and past shows. Johnny A was here for the Windjammer Festival. Brubeck Brothers was this year's Jazz in June. The Oshimas, local guys who are coming back. David Mallet was our Toboggan weekend show. Bill Frisell, probably the preeminent jazz guitarist in the country, and he's here for Jazz in June. Bob Marley, who is a main comedian with the most loyal following of any act I've ever seen. It's awesome. The woman playing the saxophone is Grace Kelly. She's going to headline our Women in Jazz night for Jazz in June. Right below her is Dervish. They're here Saturday night. And hiding behind the staff is A Day in the Life. There they are, which is a really popular Beatles tribute that is homegrown. It started here in Camden. Next slide. So the reason we can do this is we have an awesome staff. We have a really small staff, the smallest of any venue pretty much in the Mid-Coast, but they are great. On the on the left is Dagny Ernest, who does our box office and promotions. She wrote for years in the local paper. She knows arts and entertainment in the Mid-Coast better than anyone, and she's wonderful. On the right is Juniper Purinton, maybe the most capable person I've ever met in my life. She is the reason that our light and sound and video and stage and our productions are as good as they are. And she also looks after the building and keeps it looking great. We also have some wonderful volunteers. Beth O'Connor is our volunteer coordinator. Matt Brown, who curates the Jazz in June show, and a host of other folks. So these are the people that make it work. Next slide. So that's sort of an overview of who we are and what we do. The budget you have in front of you is largely operational. It's pretty straightforward and not very much changed. It's salaries and benefits, it's utilities, it's supplies. There's advertising, there's some money for equipment repair and replacement for lights and video and sound and so forth. So you can go to the next slide, which is my final slide. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, or explain as best I can anything you see about this budget. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So I just want to clarify what page we're looking at so everyone knows. And then, it is different this year. So maybe Audra can talk a little bit about where things got moved with the special revenue, and where the revenue is. Okay.
So it's shown as an assessment in the leisure services cost center in your budget. So it's got its own little tab in the back. So it's after parks, I believe, after parks is the auditorium budget. The auditorium assessment. So that's just the bottom line assessment. And one thing that, apologies, we forgot to put in your packet, but I believe we gave you handouts of their budget. Did we?
Was that emails?
Yes.
Okay. I was hoping that they'd be printed out here. So I didn't.
I have one. It's 0107.
Tab 7 is the issues.
So, okay, so just because it's that time of night and the pumpkin is turning. So page 8, it says Opera House, Town Office Building. And on one side, on the opposite side, it has the Opera House Auditorium moved to special revenue. Is that what you're talking,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the one that was emailed to all of you, we forgot to put it in your packet, and I also forgot to give you a handout. But
Is that different than the,
so that's the breakdown of the number. So 29, page 29 gives you the bottom line number. And what was emailed to you is the breakdown of that.
Actually, Jody, would you mind sharing, do you have that up
Oh,
on
I
your
see.
computer? If you could share it on the screen?
Yeah, let me grab it.
That might be an easier way for everyone to look at it at once.
So
That's the assessment and line item that all together, right? Is that
So it equals to, or actually, no, it doesn't, because anyway, it has all the line items and then the revenues as well.
I'm seeing I'm seeing an expense and revenue, 338,500. Am I looking at the right?
Yes.
Okay. Dave, I just had a question on, I see your wages, your budgeting wages to be less than the 2023 budget. Just wanted to see commentary on that, and I'm wondering if that's, but then I'm also seeing that we have a new line item of cleaning, contracted cleaning. Is that somehow related to the drop in the budget, or is that cleaning, did we not have cleaning done before, or how do we think about that?
The short answer is yes, you are correct. And I'm watching Jody's face as I say this to see if I'm getting it right. We had anticipated, bless you, we have a full-time custodian whose salary is split between the town office, which is 0106, and the Opera House, which is 0107. We had anticipated pivoting to a cleaning service because the person who was here had intended to leave. And so that changed. And so I think what happened was the funds came out of salary and into cleaning. I think it's kind of a wash as far as amounts go. And so I'm watching Jody to see if she's nodding. So in the end, I think it's the same amount of money. We had just put it in different lines, anticipating a change in how we do things that we have not. We're not doing that yet. We suspect we will, but so, okay.
All of the above.
I figured that. Thanks for the.
Oh,
And then
good
the
eye.
other, question I had, just for property maintenance, building maintenance, we have 5,000. I mean, is that adequate? I know it's an old historic building. Do you feel like, is the building in that great a shape that?
I think that tends to be a sort of smaller items that one anticipates. I mean, the building's in reasonable shape. There are some bigger projects, and I think they would come from a different place, from capital projects or from a reserve.
Yes, correct.
So this is more of a yearly maintenance, sort of smaller items.
Okay. My future mother-in-law has a historic window from the Opera House if you're ever looking for a lost window.
Wow, interesting. We'll talk later.
So to help orient me, because from the pages that we have and how we want to be able to proceed for voting, are we starting with page 8 for the Opera House Town Office Building? I just want to kind of be a little bit methodical. I want to obviously do all the questions, but I want to.
Do you want to explain that, or would that be too confusing?
I mean, are we doing like each individually, or is it going to be one rolled? Like, what ultimately are we voting on?
So the way I'm understanding is the Opera House Auditorium, which is page 9. So the auditorium is separate. It's 107, like Dave said,
Correct.
versus 106, which is the administrative part, the way it's broken out.
Okay.
And now, so there's nothing in the column that says FY24 department head, FY24 department, town manager recommendation, because it all got moved. So I don't know where that sheet is. So is that the one that's going to be up on the board?
The bottom line number we're asking you to vote on is on page 29.
Mhm.
And then the breakdown of all of that
Be-
is what
Okay.
Jody has up there.
So maybe that breakdown we need to just look at, and if there's any specific questions on
Yeah,
that one, and then
That would be helpful, because
so we'll vote on that one, and then.
Could I
and
just say one thing that you've already sort of explained, but just for clarity? The way it works is this building is sort of split. The first floor is 0106 and thought of as the town office. The upper floor is 0107 and thought of as the Opera House.
Okay.
Am I reading this, if I read this together, the Opera House looks like its budget only increased less than 1%. Is is that
Yeah, are you looking at the?
3 pages together, kind of everything?
Are you looking at the 0106 or the 0107?
106, 107, and then the final page.
The
The 300
0106 has, is being reduced by 8%.
So, but the total Opera House, even through all the changes, apples to apples, where's that coming in at?
So, Julie, do you want to pull up the expense tab for the auditorium budget?
Yeah.
So there, that gives you an idea of the change. So it's a 7.1% increase in expenses.
Okay.
For growth expenses, yeah, 7.1. And then if I switch to the revenue portion of this special revenue, which it would be a new special revenue account. These are the revenues that would offset and balance out this special revenue budget, because we need the expenses to match the revenues, of course. So these listed, and I hope you can see them, are what we are anticipating for revenues to come in. Now, down at the bottom, the town assessment, that is the number that we are asking from the general fund, the 231,000. The other 4 revenues are coming from other areas outside of the general fund.
So the total contribution of the general fund to the Opera House is up 7%.
No. Sorry. The expenses are up 7%, but the contribution changes from, Jody, if you want to bring up the.
Yep, so if we were to lay out what the auditorium was for FY23 compared to what we are asking the general fund for, it's gone down by 27%.
Okay.
So FY23 is 317,500 for Opera House Auditorium, and for FY24, we're asking for 231,000.
So I have a question, and everyone can overrule me really quickly. So just from a cognition, presentation, and voting procedure, would everyone be in agreement, and again, please overrule me, if we were to table a vote on the Opera House until we can have the printouts and things in front of us, which is no by any means reflection of what our questions or things might be, and instead allocate the remainder of our time to hear the presentations and the budgets for those, and then pick up in our next meeting to do a formal vote when we can just look at it? How does that reside, and what others? I mean, unless everyone feels like they're ready to move forward, I'm
getting really confused with one.
I didn't realize when we moved to this one that this required a lot more
It was an
explanation because it's a big change.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would second that.
Yeah.
Or agree, so we could see it in front of us, as I didn't bring my distance glasses, and to really get a full, and that way we could look at it before next week
Yeah, and
a little more
also think it
closely.
might be helpful. I think it'll be a little bit more familiar if maybe, we look at like the way the library sort of presents in the budget and how they do it, because it's pretty simple. What we're asking is something pretty similar to how that is kind of set up.
Yeah, so
Maybe we should do the library first and then.
yeah,
Yeah,
for the when we come back to it.
that
So
could help.
Yeah, the library doesn't look like a very big day.
Today is the longest, I think.
and the nice thing is that we were able to have the presentation and have the context, but I feel like to do justice to the numbers and I just feel like it'd be helpful instead of us squinting and trying to figure it out
Yeah,
to.
I think we got ambitious and hoped we could get these done in one day.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I actually think that this part is more of Jody and I sort of trying to
Yeah.
explain how we changed the.
we have the context, now we just need to look at the, yeah,
It's really a chart of accounts, June.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So fair to move forward or well, okay.
It's a good idea.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mary Beth. All right, so who would we like to do next?
Carrie, do you want to go? You want me to go?
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's a new rule we have.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson. Thank you.
Jody, are you running the slides? Is that what's going on?
Yes.
Yeah. So Caitlin and I plan to do this together. So this will be a Zoom live combination. If you're ready, Caitlin. Okay.
Carrie, are you sharing or am I sharing?
I'm not sharing anything. Just how I am.
So, just so everybody knows, this is page 4, so assessing sits within planning codes, assessing development. So that's the tab in the budget.
Jody, you want me to cue you?
Can you hear me this time?
No.
Too quiet.
Trying to find you.
Caitlin's,
Okay, Carrie, you're on.
all right, thank you. Caitlin, can we hear you?
Say
Can you
something.
hear me?
No,
Very softly.
I mean, barely.
Can you turn it up at all?
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
No.
Oh, no. All right, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right.
Better?
Okay, much better. Okay, great.
Oh, okay.
All right, so obviously it's getting late, and so we will go through this as quickly as we can. It's new to some of you who are new on the committee, and those of you who've been on before. Some of this is repetitive, and like I said, we'll go fairly quickly. Can we go next slide, please? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Just tell you who we are and what we do, give you a little bit of a review over the last year, what we're up to, talk a little bit about the revaluation, and that's really about it. So we'll cruise right along. My name is Kerry Leishman. I have been the town assessor since 2014. And my partner there is Caitlin Thompson. Take it, Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. That's Laurel, my daughter. So I'm the deputy assessor. Camden and Rockport have been sharing services since 2014 when Carrie was hired as the assessor for Camden. And then I joined in 2015. And then in 2016, I started working in Rockport as well.
Okay. One of the favorite things I like to tell a budget committee is that our compensation, the assessing department, our compensation expenses account for 1.76% of the overall town budget, and we bring in 84% of the town revenues. We could just stop it right there, maybe.
It's not even a humble brag.
No, God, no. That's two bad points. I don't share, and I'm not being humble. It's not good. Although we work for the town, we actually work under the authority of the state tax assessor.
Yes. Okay, so we compiled a kind of short list of the things that we do, so you would have a better idea. No, Jody, go back. Go back. Thank you. And I'm literally going to read from my notes because it's a list. So we do property ownership changes and maintain records. We maintain the town tax maps, approve or deny homestead, veteran, solar, blind exemptions, as well as charitable and benevolent, literary and scientific, religious, and there's a couple other categories, but we approve or deny those applications for exemption. We administer, approve or deny current use applications for farmland, tree growth, and open space, consider abatement requests, and issue abatements or supplemental tax bills when warranted, defend valuation at appeal hearings, which Bill Kelly will help us with sometimes. We explain valuation conclusions to taxpayers when things just don't make sense to them. Let's see. We do other calculations for various reports for main revenue, Knox County, and the town. We do commitment where we commit the assessed values, and then we get our mill rate, and then your tax bill, the main valuation report, county property growth tax factor, and LD1.
That's the first time, hang on a second, that's the first time she got that right.
What?
I said, that's the first time you got that county one right.
I know, it's such a mouthful. So we do business personal property, and then there's 2 relief programs for businesses, Betty and Better. One's for service businesses and the other is for retail businesses. And then there's tax relief programs that we do administer aside from homestead. The property tax deferral program, which was new last year, or well, 21, I guess, into 22. And then this year, the property tax stabilization program. Yeah, that's, oh, and we do help manage valuation updates and revaluations.
Okay,
But that's it.
that's it. Next slide, please. So this past year, Jill, this will be something very familiar to you, the COVID real estate market. So when COVID hit, we all expected that the bottom would fall out of the real estate market and mill rates would go up, and we'd be explaining to taxpayers why their mill rate went from $15 to 26 or something. It was the opposite happened. I mean, the complete opposite happened. And sales was so strong that our ratio kept dropping. We did an update last year in both Camden and Rockport, and those ratios that we established then lasted about 5 minutes, and it just kept growing. Our goal was to maintain 100% certified ratio. It proved impossible, but last year we were able to certify at 100% because I called a friend at Maine Revenue Service, and she told me about a trick, a little accounting trick that I could do. So we were able to do that last year and maintain 100%. But this year we're gonna have to certify at something like 84%, which means that we will. People will only get 84% of their homestead exemption or their veterans exemption. We'll have to multiply our revenue for personal property by the certified ratio. So it's something you want to avoid, but we just weren't able to this year. And that's one of the reasons we're doing a revaluation, which we'll talk about in just a minute. This year I became a Camden employee. Caitlin and I started working in Rockland. Our intention there was to help a neighbor that had been without assessor for more than 2 years. Audra and John in Rockport collaborated with us to make this happen. You saw me texting a bit tonight. Somebody that we think might get hired there. So we were very excited to find out about how that interview went. So our intention was to plug the holes in Rockland and make that place and make that office something that another assessor could walk into. And we haven't finished yet, but maybe we have. It'd be great. We went to the IAAO convention this year, which was held in Boston. We've never gone before because we could never justify the expense, but since it was driving distance, we went this year, and it was a great experience. We met a lot of people. Got to compare notes, how other people are assessing, and it was, especially coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of information to pick up, and we took advantage of that. Next slide, please, Jody.
All right. So Laurel is my assistant assessor, and I'm actually pregnant, so I will be on maternity leave in a couple months. So number 2 assistant assessor is on the way, very exciting. But the other thing that I'm doing right now is taking a GIS class through UMaine. And I actually enrolled in the anthropology section, so I could do it all online. I was very excited about that. It's definitely a computer intensive program, but there are lectures and readings that I get to do alongside of it. I am learning to use ArcGIS Pro, the desktop version. It's just very exciting, actually. Some of the topics that we're going to cover, I wrote them down because we haven't talked about all of them in class yet, but basic geography and map concepts, data quality, databases, spatial analysis, project management, And with my undergrad GPA, I was allowed to enroll in the certificate program. It was just a added bonus. No extra money involved, which was exciting. But it's a 5-course program, and if I complete it, I will have a certificate at the end. I'm very excited about that. And I've already started to use it a little bit with work in the office, so that was exciting the other day when I was in Rockport. I was like, oh, I know how to do this now. Like, did something. So.
GIS is integrating itself a lot into assessing and planning and everything else, and these skills Caitlin is going to pick up is going to be invaluable to us. And for me, the governor appointed me to the State Board of Property Tax Review in 2020, but we didn't hear any cases until this year because of the pandemic. But it's been pretty interesting. And for me, I've picked up a lot of experience I wouldn't have here because of the types of cases, but they're applicable to things that I do here. So it's pretty interesting. I'm also on the Legislative Policy Committee where we work with legislation, and I've been active in property tax legislation. Caitlin?
Okay. And so, yeah, the only other project that we've got going on is the reval. And Jody, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Carrie, that's all you.
All right. Yeah. So the reason we're doing a reval is twofold. One is that we need to bring our ratio up. And second is we haven't done one since we haven't done a full measure and list since 2004. And a measure and list is when we go around to every property, measure the buildings, look at the interior, and correct all of our data. And then once all of that is done, we then do statistical analysis to bring the ratios up. It's intensive. We hired KRT Appraisal to do this, and they're actually starting the field work next week. Another term for a revaluation is equalization, and that's probably the most important part, in that we'll have everybody contributing the same percentage to the tax base. And so, okay. I'm sorry?
That last sentence that you said.
I'm sorry?
Could you say that again? Repeat the.
Yeah, the equalization. So a really good example of equalization is when we did an update in 2017, the waterfront properties were at 62%, their ratio. Like Pearl Street was at 85%. And so when that reval was done, both of them were at 93%. So, one will go up, if they were at 80%, they went up, 23 points. And if they were 60%, they went up 43 points. So to me, that's the whole thing about assessing, is to be fair and equitable to everybody. And so when things begin to go out of whack, we try to do adjustments. Now, our hope is once we've done this full measure and list reval, two things happen. The real estate market starts behaving like a normal market, growing maybe 2 or 3% a year or something like that. And then Caitlin and I, will be able to just monitor what's going on. And if we see one segment beginning to go out of whack, we'll just kind of tweak it so that everything stays and there aren't a lot of big jumps. And we hope to do that every year or every other year, so that, we just get used to staying where it should be rather than letting it drift away. And there'll be a lot less trauma to people if we do it that way. Caitlin, marketing.
Make sure you didn't have another thought. But so something new that we're doing with this reval is we're trying to market it. I mean, the most important thing is to get the values right, but the next most important thing is communicating with residents and owners the process and the results. So we're looking to engage a marketing company to work with us and find fun and new ways to reach people. This morning, we actually had our first coffee with the assessors. Only one person showed up, but maybe that's because of the weather. But it was good. Like, he had questions and I don't think that they were assumptions. I think they're just things that he had heard from other people about how assessments worked. And so I took a lot of notes from what he said, and hopefully we can use that going forward to just pass out information to people.
Yeah, and a phrase he said quite often was, "I've always wondered about this." So we're looking at it as an opportunity for people just to come and ask questions, to understand how they're being taxed, how they're being valued and taxed. So we're hoping that it'll gain momentum as time goes on and people learn that we're doing it.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
I think we're done. Thanks very much. Any questions?
So I don't know if Audra wants to just go through the budget a little bit more, because the way it's shared with Rockport, and I don't see the reval as a line item in this budget. So obviously it lives somewhere else, or just maybe kind of talk a little bit about what we're looking at right here on page 4.
Yes, so on page 4, Gary's got a few specific lines that are for their, sort of operations and maintenance, operations, they don't have any maintenance. But there's a bigger expense if you flip to the capital reserves tab at the back of the budget, so I'm sorry to make everyone do this.
So just be specific.
Yeah.
Table this and like do it. I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore, guys. Like my brain is set and I have a kid at home.
Yeah.
And I don't know about this at all. But is there like didn't we talk about before? I remember there being like, can there be a cap on like
Hard stop.
8:45, whatever it is. I don't remember what time it is, but nothing past 9.
Yeah.
Like it's, I don't know about you guys. No, it does.
Yeah. That's the best way to handle it. Just table the rest of the agenda.
Just, yeah, we can table the rest of it.
Figure out a way to
Yeah.
Catch up or
We'll catch up.
add, but then I feel bad because we're like, Jeremy's been sitting here and you guys.
I know.
are meeting, and I'm just like, sorry guys. Sorry for.
He's been helpful in other ways.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just. Is there anything?
I'll come back.
Okay.
It's okay.
Carrie, wow, that's great.
I will say, I think it's important to note that Carrie and assessing and planning and code and development's budgets in the same budget.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well, that's true. So
it's just an interesting,
Right.
it's a little different than most departments.
Yeah,
We're
and-
kind of combined.
And I guess before you all go away, so there's, for assessing specifically, there's the tab 4, the operational budget. There's some money that's put aside for the reval in the capital reserves area. And then they have revenue associated with the services that they provide to Rockport and Rockland
Where's that revenue captured?
in the revenue page.
Can you see that?
I mean, like a
Yes.
tutorial.
Yeah.
I'll send questions.
Yeah.
So-
And Ray has his hand up on Zoom. Oh, no, not intentionally. I think Mary Beth.
I'm
turned
okay.
to a pumpkin.
I'm okay.
Okay. Mary Beth already turned to a pumpkin, she dropped off. So, yeah. Yeah, so first time out, very ambitious first agenda that was put out, and really good questions, which we want to keep happening, but yes, pumpkins.
You guys are all muted. Nobody can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
Can't hear anybody.
all right, there we go.
Okay, so we are with,
So I need a motion to adjourn.
yes. Anyone in a second want to second that motion? Andy seconds it. Yeah, he's like, his,
All right.
all right. All in favor? Thank you guys so much.
Bye,
To be
everyone.
continued.
Caitlin.
See you next week.
See you next week.